In these elections, voters had a genuine choice despite the lack of conditions for contestants to compete on an equal basis. The incumbent president and his party enjoyed a notable advantage, also reflected in the excessive coverage by government-affiliated public and private media. The restrictive legal framework and powers granted under the state of emergency limited fundamental freedoms of assembly and expression, including on the media. Still, citizens demonstrating their commitment to democracy by participating in large numbers in campaign rallies and on election day. Hastily adopted changes to the election were made without consultations and removed important safeguards for elections day procedures. These procedures were generally followed, although important legally prescribed steps were often omitted during counting and tabulation. These are the third election that I have observed in Turkey, and in between election cycles, I have visited the country and followed with attention the numerous and noteworthy developments that have shaped the complex and somewhat unprecedented environment that have shaped this election. During the mission, we held numerous meetings with institutional, political, as well as civil society, academia, and other stakeholders, including a long personal interview with presidential candidate Mr. Demirtas in Edirne High Security Prison. These activities were useful in gaining more insight into this election. This is precisely the attitude and the degree of cooperation that is expected from any country which invites international observers and which fulfills in good faith its international electoral commitments. Regrettably, the same level of cooperation was not sustained in concomitance with the deployment of our parliamentary observers last week. It is with profound regret I must report that two experienced parliamentarians composing our election observation mission were informed that they would be denied entry into Turkey as they were flying to Ankara. They consequently had to return home. Any external attempt to influence the composition of our election observation mission or of any of observation mission for that matter is utterly unacceptable and threatens the independence and autonomy as international observers who are obliged to abide by a strict code of conduct when they perform their duties as observers. Our mission expected more assistance from the authorities when we attempted to fully grasp the complexity of this electoral cycle. I'm referring in particular to the concept and reasoning behind the relocation of polling stations and the merging of the results, mostly in the east and southeast of Turkey. While this relocation have reportedly affected some 120,000 voters in 16 provinces, we have found it extremely difficult to fully appreciate the justification sustaining this decision. Moreover, the overlapping effect of the prolonged state of emergency and the rapid sequence of substantial legislative development led to a partial application of the legislation and to allegations of misuse of the state resources, with critical effects on the freedom of the media, to mention one example. Media outlets, including the public broadcaster, did not present voters with balanced information about the contestants.
Regrettably, contestants didn't have equal opportunities to compete in the campaign in the short time from the announcement of election to yesterday's vote. The space for democratic debate was limited due to restrictions to freedom of expression and assembly introduced as a result of ongoing state of emergency. The media coverage was different for different candidates, and we need to highlight that it wasn't equal, not a little. It have been problematic, as they have weakened important safeguards. I'm referring in particular to the relocation of polling station on security grounds, the validity of unstamped ballots, the increased authority of law enforcement officials at polling station, and of course the composition of ballot boxes committees. The selection of chairperson of the commission's ballot box committees wasn't always done by the lottery as prescribed by the law, and they've been directly appointed. Likewise, the decision of the Supreme Board election were not always public on their website, as also it was prescribed by the law. Regrettably, observers face some restrictions when carrying out their duties, and when they delivered a negative assessment, this was often linked to an authorized person which was presented on polling station, police in the polling station, or even sometime at the ballot boxes area, which is prohibited by the law.
The challenges we have noted, particularly the imbalanced media coverage and limits on media freedom, must be in the future overcome to fully live up to the democratic aspiration of the people. The 10% threshold, one of the highest in the OECD region and even in the world, despite long-standing recommendation, continues to limit political pluralism. And one remark, if you would invite the family of your future wife to your wedding, it is always difficult to stand then at the entrance and say, not this aunt, not this cousin. It is not very appropriate. The winner of the presidential election can proud look at the half of the citizen of Turkey standing behind him. Implicitly, he should keep in mind that another half has another opinion, and in his next years, he should think about also the second half of the citizens of Republic of Turkey. That will be good for him and for democracy in Turkey.
Relocations and mergers of the polling stations in the East were highly controversial, as they were regarded as aimed at lowering the turnout of HDP strongholds. They were not wanted by the voters who were affected, and many of these changes were made after the deadlines and prevented some voters from voting. Campaigning was very energetic, but the campaign environment was polarized, and candidates used harsh and denigrating rhetoric against each other. The incumbent president repeatedly referred to other candidates and parties as supporters of terrorism. And one presidential candidate was in pre-trial detention and could not campaign freely. As one candidate has much greater advantages and opportunities than the others, the conditions for contestants to compete on an equal basis was lacking. In addition, a substantial number of attacks on party activists and offices took place during the campaign. These attacks mainly affected HDP, but also CHP, the Felicity Party, and the Good Party. We were informed about detentions of more than 300 party activists and obstruction of their campaign activities. The atmosphere of fear and pressure on contestants and supporters raises concerns about their ability to campaign in a free and fair atmosphere as required by the OSCE commitments. Our media monitoring showed that presidential candidates and the political parties were not given equal access to national media outlets, and the TV mostly covered the incumbent president and the ruling party. Decisions of the SBE cannot be reviewed by a court, which remains a matter of serious concern. Our observers were sometimes obstructed also in their activities, and party and candidate representatives, as well as civil society observers, contributed to the transparency even when they faced restrictions. The state has an obligation to help the citizens have their voices heard, and this was regretfully difficult here.